Gentlemen, hey, congratulations on your new documentary, Little Empty Boxes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Oh,
man.
thank you for making this documentary and speaking to us about the film. But we have to ask is what actually sparked you to film this story?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I mean, I my background is journalism. So I post college, I worked for Al Gore for 6 or so years for a TV network that he had in the U.S. called Current TV. Prior to that, I was in college. I was a film major at University of Miami, and about 6 years into my role as a journalist for this Al Gore project, in my personal life, my mom got sick. My mom started to exhibit the earliest signs of what would ultimately be diagnosed as a rare form of dementia called Lewy body dementia. And it was incredibly painful and traumatic for me and my family to come to terms with. It was also shocking, to be quite honest, because of the fact that my mother was young and I had no prior family history of any kind of neurodegenerative disease. And so, as somebody who had, been a journalist, an investigator of sorts, and had acquired the skills of filmmaking as an undergraduate and on the job for the during my tenure at the Al Gore TV network, capturing it all on film seemed to me the best way to um, memorialize what it was that my mom was going through, to find solutions for her, because I knew that people wouldn't necessarily, experts wouldn't necessarily talk to me as a civilian, right? Like the researchers that we've interviewed in the documentary, they wouldn't just get on the phone with me. But using my calling card as a journalist, as a filmmaker, as somebody who was like creating a project about this, it would get me into rooms that would otherwise be off limits to me. And then I guess the third reason why I started filming was it was in a way my way as an artist of deriving some degree of meaning out of what was ultimately an incredibly painful experience. And yeah, and it was just, as a native child of the internet and somebody who was like really used to, I'd been filming my mom since childhood. Really, it just felt very sort of native to me. And then, of course, I met Chris, and Chris helped me turn it all into the film that it is today.
Chris, tell us about what initially drew you to this and your involvement.
Sure. Yeah. As someone with zero journalism backgrounds or medical backgrounds or understanding of the science behind anything going on, when I saw the first cut of the film, I see and I'm introduced to Max's mother, Kathy, and it just felt like I was watching a movie with like starring my own mom. Like she's so relatable and so charismatic. And I just felt like, oh, I don't even know these people, but this is like my family on screen, it feels like. Um, and she was so full of enthusiasm, and I just fell in love with her spirit and everything about her. Um, and I just knew that I wanted to see what else was there. Like what else was cut out. You know, for someone who spends years and years and years filming their family and also pursuing the medical side and the science side of it, by interviewing all these people, I was curious at what was left out of the cut. And that, I was very interested in the film at that point, but it wasn't really until Max shared with me sort of his vault of footage, which was almost 2,000 hours of footage, that I sat and watched every single second of, that I was like, oh, this is a game changer. Like the most amazing things are in this that will never see the light of day unless I put them there, and they need to be there, you know. So that's what really drew me in.
So when you were drawn to this, brought on to this project, was after all of the footage was done?
That's correct. Yeah. And I believe, I mean, Max, you can probably speak more into this. I don't know exactly when you guys stopped filming, but I know that at some point they had acquired enough footage to make a film. They had edited that footage into a film. And then I believe Max was not happy with the final edit of that film. Thus, I guess you went around searching for people that could help, and somehow our paths ended up crossing. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the search. It wasn't a particularly active search. I mean, I you know, the film at a certain point, we had achieved all of the footage I think necessary to tell the story of my mom in the most respectful and complete way possible. We'd had enough footage to convey the science side of things, um, but we had achieved a cut really early on that I think for the time was appropriate for the time contextually in my life, as well as my mom in her life. I think my mom, in fact, my mom was alive at the point at which we achieved the rough cut, and so it was a cut of the film that didn't quite resonate emotionally. It was more informational. It was more of a documentary portraying my journey as a son, and we needed, I guess, we needed the vantage point of time, and ultimately what happened was the film, we ran out of funding, as is often the case with documentaries, unfortunately. And it was a very painful process actually trying to figure out what the next step for the film would be. But rather than wallow in the you know in that aspect of things, I went on to make a living and to create to continue building a career for myself. And then it was only through happenstance that I connected with Chris and his partner Jacob, who are obviously incredibly talented, and have done incredible work already in the world of filmmaking. And I'd been so tired from the process already that I was just, I submitted to the universe and the laws of attraction, and I was like, all right, I just went. I let Jesus take the wheel, so to speak. I'm Jewish, but I feel like I can, I like the phrase. But I sent Chris and Jacob all the footage, and I don't know what I was expecting. I was hoping that it was going to resonate with them. But of course, it had been such a long process that I didn't know what to expect. And the cut of the film, as I mentioned, that we had wasn't exactly, at the top of the film's potential. But nonetheless, Chris and Jacob, Chris really took the time to look through all the footage and really get to know my mom through the raw footage, which is just an incredibly, I mean, I can't even imagine, like how tedious it is watching, hours and hours and hours of raw footage. As an audience, we're used to seeing the final product, right? But raw footage can, there's a certain level of patience that's required. But anyway, Chris watched it all, and they really believed in the project. They really believed in me. They saw, the light in my mom and her capacity to resonate with audiences, and yeah, what he ended up creating as a result is just magical. Nothing short of magic.
Chris, that's a lot of dedication. So tell us how you helped craft the narrative, and is it an advantage to be that person on the outside?
Sure. Well, this is where it gets pretty wild. So I sat down. First I flew out to Los Angeles to have dinner with Max, get to know him. We talked a little bit about the project. He agreed with kind of blind faith to let this stranger take everything that he had captured of his life on camera and make a movie of it, right? And I went home and like I said, I watched all the footage, and I sort of in my head started building a bit of a film. As daunting as the task was, it was very enjoyable. And by the end of watching, almost 2,000 hours of somebody's life, the really crazy thing is you feel like you've known them. Like in my head, it's not real, but I felt like Max was like a brother. Like I was like, oh, I've seen Max from when he's this big, wrapped up on, in a little carrier, all the way to being a grown man. I've seen every moment of his life. So I feel like I experienced it, even though I did not. And that was really weird. So then I had basically like a 500-page Google document of notes that I had taken on everything I had watched. And I started going, okay, well, how do I start cutting this down? It is not surprising to me at all that Max had a hard time with the first cut because it is an impossible task that no one should ever be tasked with choosing what parts of their mother's life goes in a movie and what parts to cut out. That's an impossible task to ask anybody. And so it required somebody on the outside to observe it all and make those decisions. And I had to do that. What really drove the film, though, was that as soon as I started working on the movie, on the actual editing, once I had watched everything, my own mother-in-law developed dementia and suddenly was in a nursing home with full-time care. And I was going through everything I had just watched in this videotapes. And that blew my mind. And suddenly I felt such a responsibility with this film to go, okay, there are plenty of books and resources out there and podcasts and so many things out there for people who want to spend 10 years learning about this. But what about the people like me, the people like Max, the people who just have this disease sprung onto them in their life and it just shatters what they know is reality? What would those people want to know and take away from this? And so that's what drove the whole narrative for me was, what do I need to know? What does my wife need to know? What does Max, what does his brothers, what do everyone out there who are in this position need to know when you enter this world? Because once you're in it, there's no getting out. And you have all the time in the world to start looking things up and asking questions, all these things. But when it happens, when that switch turns and you now have dementia in your family, it's pretty radical how drastic things get very quickly.
Excellent. Max, as you mentioned before, your background as a journalist, it helped you talk to a lot of these researchers and scientists itself. Could you tell us what is the conclusive agreement between all? Because a lot of research still is up in the air for dementia and Alzheimer's, but you actually came that there is some kind of commonality that everybody is kind of like shifting towards.
Yeah, I'm glad that you phrased the question the way that you did. You're right. Science is continually evolving. It's not settled, and 90% of what we know about Alzheimer's disease, in particular, which is only one form of dementia, has been discovered in the past 20 or so years. So, I mean, there are no hard and fast rules, and I think that the film does a really good job of not being overly prescriptive and not providing a sort of, unlike a lot of documentaries that tend to dip their toe into into the world of nutrition, which is highly polarizing today, unfortunately. The documentary, there are no simple solutions. I mean, at the end of the film, you don't come away with some sort of magic diet or prescription. The message of, I think, it's a more holistic message, which I think is appropriate given the multifaceted and multifactorial nature of dementia. And I do like to talk about the fact that we do have incredibly legitimate scientists in the film. I mean, it's unheard of for a film with no guaranteed distribution to get to go and film interviews within the walls of Harvard, Brown University, Cornell. I mean, it was just like an insane privilege that we had to film interviews with some of the researchers that we've filmed interviews with. And then we've included in some other more, I guess, public facing medical experts who are, like authors in the field of experts in the field of functional medicine and the like, just more recognizable faces to kind of bring home the more actionable takeaways that we wanted to elucidate in the film. But the salient, I think, take home, especially particularly from a nutrition perspective, it's not that there's any one magical diet or pill or food or anything like that. It's that, we live in a time today where the food environment has become largely processed, ultra processed, in fact. And I think the key take home from the film is just to get back to a dietary pattern that incorporates more whole foods, less ultra processed foods. I really think that that's the key takeaway. It's not, low carb. It's not low fat. It's not, there's no one magic prescription. And I'm really proud of that, actually.
Sounds great. And Max, after people watch this film, well, Max and Chris, after audiences have a chance to watch this film, what is the one most important take you hope they walk away with?
Hmm.
Oh man, there's a few ways to answer this. I mean, I think on the one hand, it's that we're not helpless when it comes to these kinds of conditions. But the earlier you start to look after your health, the better. I think that's one really important take home. It's a take home of agency. It's an empowering message. But I think, and I credit this to Chris, that I think the more important take home is that you gotta show the people in your life that you love them on a daily basis, because they could be taken away from you at any moment. And that's why we settled on a tagline for the film. It's a film about the ones we love, and and full credit goes to Chris for really helping to surface that core message of the film, which I think is the message most likely to resonate with audiences, in fact.
Chris?
Um, Mine is one takeaway in three parts. It's get up and move your feet, put better stuff in your body, and call someone and tell them you love them. That's to me is like the core message of this film, is like be better in multiple ways, and we show you how in the film.
Most excellent. Those are great takeaways. And one last thing before I leave, Max, what if you want to basically say something to about your mother, what would you say that people should remember her the most?
Hmm. I mean, she was the most important person in my life. She was an amazing woman, an incredible mom. I miss her immensely. She was taken from us far too soon, and chronic disease is really barbaric. It's really awful, and we are still very limited. Our tools with regard to Western medicine are still very limited, and so I really think that so that my mom, the tragedy that was ultimately my mom's life, isn't in vain. I hope that people take a mess take I hope people take to heart that looking after your health is important. It's always worthwhile. It's never in vain. And my mom did look after her health, actually. So I also want people to know that it's sometimes you just get the unlucky draw, and that's why I think just living by the golden rule and showing the people in your life that you love them, I think is just crucially important, because again, you never know how long you've got, and that's why you've got to make each day matter.
Yes, this film is very meaningful. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for speaking to us about Little Empty Boxes. It's very emotional and very touching. So a lot of people should definitely watch it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.